Hi, we're here today with Julie Barrett at, I'm sorry, I forgot already. What's the name
Maple
of
Lane Farm.
Maple Lane Farms, where, well, what do you have here at Maple Lane
Well,
Farms?
primarily it's an apple orchard, and it's set up for a pick-your-own operation. That means people come from wherever and pick their own apples, and I always have ready-picked apples available for people who don't have the time, don't choose to pick, or would just soon have them already picked for them.
Cool. What kind of apples do you have?
Well, our season starts out with Macintosh, and then we have Cortland, McCowan, Empire, John o' Gold, Golden Delicious, Northern Spy, and Mutsu.
Oh, okay. Which one's your favorite?
My favorite's McCowan.
Ah, okay. So, how long has Maple Lane Farms been in business?
This will be the 20th year.
20 years, wow.
Pick your own, yes.
And have you seen a lot of changes in how you have to care for the apples in terms of the climate, or?
Maybe not so much the care. Yeah, they change because the trees are more mature now. There's more pruning to do. They require probably more fertilizer than they did when they were smaller trees and that sort of thing. More change in how people pick or how much they pick.
Really?
Yes, I think the times for people doing a lot of preserving and canning are kind of a bygone era, and I think people are picking more for fresh eating purposes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Smaller quantities, families are smaller, but they may come more times than they did in past years. They may have only come once or twice a season, and now they may come on a weekly basis.
Oh, wow. So it might actually be more per
It
family?
may be. Overall, but hopefully they're more happy with the apples because they're fresher.
Yeah.
And they keep better when they only picked a small quantity at a time.
Yeah. Cool. I was also wondering some about the carrot apples. I noticed, looks like all your apples are pretty much, apple shaped. And sometimes when I see like a wild tree out there, the apples are
Well, they do
varied.
require some spraying. There's two things that are problematic for apples: are a fungus called apple scab, which happens in the springtime, and it's very dependent on the weather. If it's rainy, the apple scab spores are more prevalent, and there's usually more damage. So you need to cover for apple scab fungus, and then there are insects that bother apples. The insects aren't in the apple, but they may have stung the apple when the apple was a flower.
Oh, okay. I don't think I asked, but how big is your setup?
It's about 6 acres of apples. The main orchard's about 4, and this one's approximately 2 acres.
Cool. So with all these different varieties, is there like a time sequence in which they mature?
Yes, and it all depends on the varieties that someone has in their orchard. My earliest apple is Macintosh. That's the one we start picking, and that picking will go right through till early October, give or take a few days depending on the weather. If it's really hot and sunny, they may drop faster, or if it's rainy, or if we have a windstorm, they'll tend to drop and not hold on that long. We have Cortlands, which will start about mid-September and go through early mid-October. McCowans will start the latter part of September in through mid-October. John o' Golds will be about the same timing as the McCowan. The Empire will be early October through the end of October. And Northern Spy is my latest variety, which is mid-October through the end of October, or into early November, depending on the season. And the Mutsu apple is also a mid-October apple.
So basically your orchard's open from like September through the beginning of November?
Yes.
Cool. So I noticed you have these lovely wagons here.
Yes, they're handy for people who aren't maybe as in shape, to lug these buckets. When this bucket is full, it'll weigh 20 plus pounds.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And this one will weigh 10 pounds. But it's all, their wagons are convenient for people with small children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, if people have a wagon to pull their apples, they may pick more than if they had to carry them.
And do you need to, what's it called, remove some of the flowers, like when they're flowering?
No, we don't remove any flowers. There are, you can do thinning of the apples.
Mm-hmm.
There is a natural thinning that happens in June. It's called the June drop.
Oh, okay.
And you can go and look underneath a tree and you'll see, you know, cherry-sized apples all on the ground because it's a natural thinning process. There are orchards that do chemical thinning. I have not done that. You can do some hand thinning. I have done some of that in the past too.
Do you do any processing of the apples yourself?
The processing we do for the orchard, we make cider with second apples. And as we're grading through apples, there'll be ones that don't make top quality apples to be bagged. So those ones, and sometimes from the ground, as long as they're sound, sound apples go into cider making. We wash the apples and they go through a cider press, and we will make fresh cider weekly from probably the second week of the season right through till Thanksgiving. Our cider is always blended, that meaning more than one apple variety is used. It makes a better flavor, and cider is something that evolves through the season. It's quite tart at the beginning of the season, and it gets sweeter as the season progresses. And because the apples are more ripe and the varieties are sweeter later in the season.
So another question I have is there any technique to picking apples that's the best?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked because so many people don't pick apples properly. When you pick an apple, you pick with the palm of your hand. We'll get where we can reach one that's more singly and more easy to see. I don't know if you can see this with the camera, but you want to put your hand underneath it and you want to lift and turn. Oh. When you pick an apple, you should always pick it with the stem. It'll keep better that way. It's not really a twisting process. So many people think it's a twisting process. It's definitely not a pulling process, because when you pull an apple, you'll have a few others drop to the ground. Once they've dropped to the ground, they're not as valuable anymore. So it's a lift and turn.
Lift and turn, wow.
And there one, there you go. We want to keep the fruit spurs on the trees. That's where next year's fruit's going to grow from.
Ah, okay.
So if you pull it, you often will pull the spur off, and then there won't be any fruit on that spot next year.
Wow. I would have just pulled.
Well, I'm glad you learned. That's one of the biggest things I try to teach the children, because if the children learn that, then they hopefully will tell a parent or an adult that they learned that when they were at the apple orchard. There is a fair amount of damage done in a pick your own orchard from the public because of that, not knowing how to pick properly. Sometimes you'll get someone coming in with a branch of apples.
Oh, wow.
That's not such a great thing, but that doesn't happen too often anymore.
It's been very nice to let us come out and see your orchard.
Thank you very much for coming out, and I hope you tell some friends or family and send them up to here this way this fall sometime.
This is Maple Lane Farm. Where exactly are we?
We're technically in Gilsum, but our access is Keene, so we use Keene as our mailing address. So I say Keene for the most part.
Write it down, write it down.